Good morning and welcome. This is the MTN IoT Webinar series, the third in our series. Today, it's all about smart cities. We've already had agri, we've had mining, and today smart cities. And we live in the midst of a slow-moving revolution. On the one hand, it feels kind of slow-moving because we're right in the thick of it. But on the other, it's moving incredibly rapidly as we adopt technology, as technology becomes woven into the very fabric of our lives. And I guess it's important we know and understand it. And today, we're going to have a look at smart cities. What does it mean? What is a smart city? I'm not sure anybody's entirely, there's no one crystal definition of it, but we're going to certainly try and give an overview of the landscape of what it means to have a smart city, how we think about it, how we go forward. So let's get the program kicked off, and we're going to start with the official welcome and setting the scene, and presenting that and giving that scene setting is going to be the General Manager, Product and Capability, Enterprise ICT Business Capability Building for MTN Business. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll turn over now to Dr. Nkosi Khumalo.
Thank you very much for that riveting welcome. I guess I'm going to have to live up to the great introduction that you have done. Thank you very much. Firstly, I want to welcome all of you to this webinar. And I think probably some of you are asking themselves questions around what is the relevance of MTN when it comes to the smart city, IoT, and making sure that we can progress these capabilities going forward. Let me just give you a bit of context, right? So we as MTN, we are predominantly a connectivity player. And I'll be honest with you, when you are looking for connectivity partner to leverage on use cases around IoT and ultimately delivering a smart city initiative, really connectivity is a bedrock. It's very, very key. It's fundamental to get it right so that you can build from there and going forward. MTN as an organization today, we are proud that we're not only good at building, the connectivity piece. Myself as a head of product that is looking after multiple products within MTN business, just to give you a snippet, I'm looking after the connectivity business, which is responsible for driving fixed connectivity into enterprise businesses across different industries, leveraging on our capability on IoT, where we don't only do SIM management, but at a local and also at a global scale, but we also drive acceleration of use cases, leveraging of the power of data that is extracted from these devices and sensors, and also help you with conversations around how you enable capability that you want, depending on the industry that you find yourself in. There's a cloud play that I'm also looking after, which is the ability to leverage hyperscaler solutions, mix them with our data center investment that has local, call it private cloud deployment, drive a hybrid capability where you can have workloads moving between local capability as in the data centers and also public cloud, manage them through one control panel and be able to actually drive workloads and pay for them as you use them. And the last one that I'm looking after is the security capability. To have a smart city enabled conversation or initiative, you cannot leave security behind. It's very, very important. And it's not only security for the endpoint devices, it's security for the network, it's security for the hardware, it's security for the applications, and security for the perimeter, and also taking it further and making sure that you've got a security operating center that can monitor your environment 24/7 and make sure that there's proactive monitoring of any threats. Distributed denial of services can be mitigated before they happen. And this is really the capability that we are building as MTN. Today, MTN has got key big bets that we are taking to market. We've got data-driven business, which has got over 13.6 million active users in our base. We've got a digital business that is driving approximately 10 million IOBA customers. We've got a fintech business. We've got enterprise business, which has got a market share growth of 33% year on year. And we are also the biggest wholesale business in South Africa, approximately about 10 billion that we are delivering on that business. If you look at now the conversation that we want to have around the relevance of 5G IoT in enabling the smart cities, MTN today has got about 65,000 cell sites across South Africa with about 15% coverage on 5G. The conversation that we want to have, which we are going to have in a deeper level later on, my colleague Sudipto will obviously be going into the how with regard to how you leverage our capability to actually deliver the smart cities. But use cases that we have seen that are enabled by all these things that I have mentioned. You know, one of them that are pretty quite relevant from a South African point of view, and I was just listening to one video that was quite interesting. Schneider Electric and UJ drove an initiative in Kokwane village, where this village was they call themselves forgotten people, where there's no municipal services at all. Kokwane village is a village that has got about 100 people. And I believe there's about 3 or 4 people that are actually working in that community. Some of the challenges this community has been having is, just as an example, people had to drive or walk to another village where there's a generator, where they've got access to a little bit of power, and they were charged to actually charge a cell phone. They were charged like 5 rand, sometimes 3 rand to actually charge a cell phone. Wait for it for 2 hours, sometimes an hour, come back and be able to exercise their need to speak, in essence. And what Schneider Electric has done is they've deployed solar power in Gokane village. They've invested in panels that are able to pump boreholes and extract water. And I've seen the benefit that comes from that, where IoT has actually been used to monitor this deployment, because this is a mission critical for this village. Extracting water, being able to water your garden, being able to provide food for sustainability, being able to provide water to the kettles, being able to provide people with clean water, and all those kind of things. This is really how IoT can really deliver the basic requirements of human dignity. MTN as an organization believes that we give people the benefits of a modern connected world, and we obviously deliver that through the capability that we are building. Being able to provide IoT and help these communities to have continued access to that infrastructure and monitor it proactively before it goes down. Because if it does go down, it means the community is not able to live and have sustainable lives. So IoT, the power of connectivity, the infrastructure, extraction of data, making sure that the data is actually used to proactively monitor, maintain, and support those communities, and ultimately give them a better life. These people today are having a bakery which is driven by solar, which is monitored centrally and making sure that bread is delivered to the communities on a daily basis. Some of these people were actually saying that they are not able to access bread. Bread, they would see it when visitors come from outside. So I'm really making one of these use cases from our back home here in South Africa. And it's not only Gokwane village that is going through these basic, challenges. There are many villages in South Africa where there's no infrastructure, where organizations like MTN, leveraging all technology capabilities, 5G, 4G, 3G, being able to get there wide into the rural areas and be able to provide visibility from an infrastructure point of view to ensure that people have got access at least to a modern connected life. The dignity of a modern connected life is what we believe in as MTN, and we live every day trying to deliver on that, regardless of whether you are in the city or you are in the rural areas. This is who we are. I want to thank you for giving me the time to give you an elevator conversation. I'm going to hand back now to Ryan. Thank you very much.
Nkosi, thank you very much for that. Setting the scene, and I think there's going to be a theme here. We realize that connectivity, as has already been pointed out, is the bedrock of everything. The distinguishing factor between a dumb thing and a smart thing is being connected. Take any item. Your watch is dumb until it is connected, and that connectivity layer becomes really, really important. And I think that's what we're looking to have established and built throughout everything, so that on top of that, we can build smart cities, smart mines, smart agriculture. All of this is built on that. Now, next on our program that you'll see was supposed to be Mr. Steve App talking about understanding top-level design for smart cities. However, last minute, he was asked to go to Ghana, so he's currently on a plane to Ghana for an urgent meeting with the equivalent there, with the power supplier in the Ghanaian equivalent of Eskom. So what we're arranging is that once he's landed and got there, we're going to record his presentation, which will be sent out to all the attendees, everyone who registered for this webinar. But he was sadly unable to give his presentation live. So we're going to move on now with the next in the program. And this is talking about 5G and your city, how connectivity and IoT makes your city smart. And if you've attended any of the previous webinars on this topic, you will be familiar with Sudipta Moitra, who's the General Manager of ICT for MTN Business, and he's now going to be talking about this and smart cities. So now, live in studio, I'll be handing over to Sudipta Moitra.
Hello, and welcome to the IoT webinar. We are talking about a great subject today, smart cities. Thank you, Ryan, for that introduction. As my colleague Nkosi mentioned, he is looking after all the products within the enterprise space, and my responsibility is to create solutions. The products that we have and the assets that we are working with the different partners and the ecosystem, how do we co-create? So going straight into the topic for today, and talking a bit about connectivity, the understanding of how, as MTN, we see the concept of smart cities, what are the different areas that we need to kind of build together, co-create, and what are some of the practical examples that we want to look at, and what are some of the design elements that might be relevant as we go and co-create this and create the smart city in South Africa. So just to start off with, just on the next slide. Sorry, just waiting for the cursor to work. Great. So what is smart city? I think, there are various different definitions, but effectively, if we look at the rapid urban migration of populations, that is creating the demand of the modern world, the modern connected world. There are, every city is in like different maturity stage. There are different unique characteristics, but there are some common shared pain points that we are seeing across the world that we live in. So whether it is across the safety, whether it is public transport, the healthcare, the education, the whole ecosystem that touches us as a citizen, every single building block, along with the policies, that we have in the public and the private environment becomes quite a unique feature from a smart city perspective. This is something that I read about, and I think it's very relevant for today's discussion. It's something that Deloitte's published, and I believe it's quite relevant. African cities are at the crossroads of development in one shape or the other, providing the unique opportunity for cities to innovate and lead a new generation of thinking whilst demonstrating tangible benefits to their citizens and to the world. And I think for me, this kind of defines what we are looking at. So what is smart city? As I said, there are very different definitions, etc. But for me, I think, it kind of all comes down to the investment and the focus on transformational elements that as an ecosystem, we are trying to put together to create the currency, whether it's from a human capital perspective, whether it's the currency of social capital, whether it's the currency of quality of life, the communication, and the sustainable economic development. So in our view, I think these are, the kind of the concept that all the cities are working towards to create a smart city. But how do we get to the smart city? The cities that we look, the world we live in, and this is a kind of a global concept, I think most of us in the webinar today will agree that probably we can categorize cities in three ways. A legacy city, a legacy city that has been there for quite a long time. The aging infrastructure that has come in, the constant funding that is required to maintain it, the upgrades, the maintenance, that is required. And that's, a lot of cities that we have in South Africa probably will resonate to this legacy environment. However, there are new cities, in the emerging markets, in our countries, the urbanization that is bringing in, regulatory controls, constructions and operations, inclusiveness, that is creating this element of new cities that we find. And then the third category is more about the transitioning cities. A very interesting view, primarily seen in South Asia and Africa, where we are looking at, the transitioning from the legacy to the new area, the strategic planning, the associated funding thereof, also related to the population expansion from the rural to the urban. And that's something very, very key that I think from a maturity perspective of cities, where each of the cities fit in, and it's a journey. And different cities has got different needs, that we need to work towards. So what are the dimensions of the smart city that we talk about? As I said, there are various blueprints. But for me, this kind of resonates that brings everything together. And again, most of the people on the webinar, probably it would resonate with them to say, the dimension of the smart city, if you take with the ecosystem first, it's the dimension of, the private sectors, whether it's the large enterprise, public enterprise, SME, retailers, together with the public sector, the government departments, agencies, schools, education. There's a third segment, the non-profit organizations, social enterprises, and very important, the community. So that's the ecosystem which kind of creates at the center the key fulcrum of the smart city. And then with them, from the bottom, you see all the different elements that touches the citizens. Whether it is the health, the economy, whether it's the power, water, public safety, you name it, everything that is touching the interconnected systems that is kind of required, that is touching the ecosystem. And that then needs to be enabled by the infrastructure, as we have been saying for a long time, both the hard infrastructure and the soft infrastructure. And I would like to emphasize on the soft infrastructure, and I'll dive into a little bit more details later in my slides, where we are talking about the governance, where we're talking about leaderships, the innovation forum. And all of this, then, as a dimension of the smart city, we kind of look, everything is there for the people. Whether it's the citizens, the people from outside that are coming into a country, into the cities, the employees, the innovators, and finally, what is the true north of smart city, which is at the top, the goals, aspiration, and the quality of the life across various parameters that needs to be measured. So, this is again a kind of a blueprint from Deloitte that we are using as a good reference point when we are having the conversations across the smart cities. So smart cities will enable smart choices and smarter outcomes. And what is very important, as MTN, what we truly believe, as we know, on the continent, as Africa, we have some advantages, some very powerful advantages that we believe will enable us to kind of look at the journey of the smart cities. The urbanization, the African cities continuously to grow, from urbanization and the increase that we are having. The entrepreneurial spirit, I think, who will debate this point, that on the continent, we're so fortunate to have this entrepreneurial spirit with the young population that we have. Very important, the youthful consumer population. That creates a very different use cases and advantages when we are coming to smart cities. And as MTN, what we are believing in and how we're working together. And underpinned by that is the connectivity, the penetration of the modern connected life that's happening on the African continent, in our country. As my colleague Nkosi mentioned, as MTN, we believe that everybody deserves the benefit of the modern connected life. So from a smart connection perspective that make a smarter city, I think, as Ryan also alluded, that connectivity is the bedrock of smart. So what is this connectivity? If we look at the evolution of this connectivity, we all know, some of us come from that 1G, 2G era, where digital voice calls, texting, basic data services, what kind of gave birth to the technologies of connectivity. But we have moved on, the advent of 3G, 4G, the mobile broadband, the fast use of internet protocol are live, the reach and the connectivity is quite profound in South Africa. And obviously the 5G, which is the kind of the talking point, which is again an advanced technology, the wireless ecosystem that it can create, enhance mobile broadband technology features that it can bring to bear is fantastic. And what it means is, when we start looking at the ecosystem, the digital ecosystem that potentially can enable the smart cities, there are various use cases, various requirements. From a smart city perspective, there might be mission-critical control environments, use cases, whether it is autonomous vehicles, whether it is remote control and process automations across the different industries, both public and private, which has a very different requirement from a connectivity of probably less than 1 millisecond. Then we have got the massive Internet of Things, where we are looking at the scale. We are looking at smart buildings, utilities, we are looking at tracking and sensors across the different citizens, across the different value chain. And then you have got, the enhanced mobile broadband, which brings very different network requirements. And similarly, the resilience, sometimes the different use cases, whether we talk about the on-demand services, the bandwidth requirement, the end-to-end security. And this is the digital ecosystem, from a connectivity perspective that needs to enable. And with the advent of the modern technologies that we are rolling out, in the country, I think it's a great opportunity to kind of take advantage of it. I'm not going to go into the details of this slide, but what we are seeing is, as the network maturity is happening, it's not just the 5G, but the 4G and the 3G, which is also very relevant. It's not just the public network, but the private network and the hybrid network. As the maturity goes on, these are some of the use cases that we believe from a scale of time that is relevant. So from a short-term perspective, whether it is sensor monitoring, whether it's drone for inspections, whether it is VR for gaming, gaming, whether it is smart CCTV, wearables, etc. These are some of the real use cases that we are working with the ecosystem today. We are creating solutions, across the value chain. And as things mature in the medium term, we believe that, we will give a great opportunity to look at scaling some of these technologies and enabling elements of, smart hotels, smart roads, precision farming, that all are different building blocks of the smart cities. And over a period of time, from a long term, we believe that, with the maturity, what would become more real and practical is elements like self-driving cars, wireless smart meters, remote control for factory robots, etc. And that is the evolution that we are going through. From an MTN perspective, this is something that we are working towards, and it's a reference point. We call it MCT, MTN Connected Things. From an IoT perspective, if you look at the bottom, it's all about sensors that is connecting on the network. And this is something I think we have matured over a period of time. The whole industry has matured over a period of time. If you move up the stack, then it's the layer of the platform. At MTN, we are looking at the MTN Z Smart platform that we are working towards, to make sure that the features of this platform that enables different components of connectivity across the value chain becomes a key enabler. And this is something that we have. But where we are going, and what's very important, is the enablement layer. The applications that the communication layer is then touching to, the integration points, the APIs, the marketplace, and the devices, that makes the whole smart city concept more real, more practical. And where, as MTN, we are working with our ecosystem, we are working with our alliance partners, is around the top block, which is the industry vertical applications. So as Nkosi gave the mention of, and he shared the story of the village, but it's real across the value chain that we need to make from the basics and all the way move into the maturity of the ecosystem. And eventually it's the big data, the data that's the gold and the analytics and the insight that we need to mine. So at MTN, this is from an IoT perspective, this is what we are co-creating with the clients, creating different solutions. And it's not just about the IoT technologies that as MTN we have, the 3G, 4G, 5G as an example, the NB-IoT that we're in the planning of rolling out, but also the other technologies like Sigfox, like LoRaWAN, that becomes very relevant because it talks to the devices and the investment that as each of the different entities have already made. Now, this slide, as I start wrapping up, this is the kind of the journey. This is our own journey of MTN enterprise business. We come from that core mobile background, and we're moving up the stack into what we call the connectivity, the ICT fixed connectivity, the Internet of Things that I've just shared in the previous slide, the ICT infrastructure. As Nkosi mentioned, it's not just the products that we are building, the hyperscalers, but the relevance of edge computing and leveraging the MTN assets of data center and security controls that becomes very relevant in this modern world where we are looking at the convergence of IT and OT. What are the controls that we bring to bear? And obviously, moving on the right are the adjacent services that becomes very relevant. And this is where we are working with our clients, with the different segments, and creating solutions together, across the different value chains of the industry. So when we talk about, from an IoT perspective and smart city, we believe on the left-hand side, as you can see, these are the different commercial drivers and technologies that are making the use cases a lot more relevant. Whether it's the enhanced mobile broadband, where we are looking at the reality of having, video calling, fixed wireless, ultra-high definition videos, or virtual reality and augmented reality, or the technologies like fixed wireless access, which touches across the board of SMEs, SOHOs, smart homes. And as MTN, we are rolling out the wireless access technologies like Tarana, the fixed LTE that we have got makes a very significant impact on making these use cases more real. Or if we move into the massive scale communication, as I spoke about, which then starts touching on healthcare, vehicle to vehicle, smart homes, and the features of the technology on the connectivity make it more real. And finally, the ultra-reliable low-latency services, that then touch across the value chains of the different industries. And this is where the industrial automations, etc., are becoming a lot more real. And there's a lot of work that, as MTN and our partners, we are doing in co-creating, in doing proof of concepts to make it work. It's not just about the connectivity, but the proof of concept is the business outcome. Can we do that together in a more controlled and in a more agile way? We don't have to do everything together. And then the final similarly, the private, the network slicing opportunity that gives across the value chain makes the whole private wireless ecosystem a lot more real in the context of IoT, in the context of the smart cities. So just to close off, I believe that what we will hear in today's webinar, and I really encourage a lot of thoughts, questions, so there are a lot of scenarios, that can be real, that can be more practical, that the advent of the likes of 5G is giving us, whether it's the reliability, the low latency, the speed, the capacity, and with that, IoT, the convergence of industrial IoT, with the convergence of with the IT, the normal IT, it gives birth to massive Internet of Things, the smart agriculture, the smart city, the cost, the commercial element becomes very real because as a technology, we are seeing a lot is possible, but can we work from a total cost of ownership perspective, ROI perspective, so that shareholders are prepared to kind of put in? And the critical controls, and I really encourage the whole ecosystem to come together. Let's work together to create the right policies that helps us to accelerate, this journey of the smart city, that helps us to accelerate putting the building blocks. And we don't need to do all of them together, as long as I think we are aware of the true north, that we are working towards creating the smart cities, the smart villages, the smart country that we are aspiring to. As MTN, we really, really look forward in the partnership and the alliances, and I wish all of you a great, great webinar. Thank you very much.
The modern city is a powerhouse, fast-paced, dynamic, with millions of moving parts that must fit together seamlessly. But as cities grow larger and more complex, so too do the challenges they face. To keep ahead, our cities need to evolve, and the next step in this process is the development of smart cities. But what exactly is a smart city? Well, imagine a place where millions of devices collect and share data. That's devices fitted to power plants, traffic lights, water networks, schools, hospitals, police patrols, community services, and even individual citizens' engagement, all in real time. This data can then be analyzed and used to manage city assets, so resources and services can be allocated fast and effectively. And this isn't a story about some distant future. With the power of 5G and smart solutions of IoT, science fiction is fast becoming science fact. Smart cities are a reality, and any urban area that wants to meet the needs of its citizens in the 21st century needs to embrace the technology. Following international best practice, smart city IoT solutions use data sharing to improve economic development, improve infrastructure planning and maintenance, digitally optimize public assets, automate services, and help clean the environment. That means smart roads, smart buildings, smart water monitoring, smart waste management, smart safety and security systems, and so much more. It's a real win-win, both for our cities and their citizens. The only question is, how can you 5G your city? And the answer is quite simple. MTN Business is already an industry leader in the space and has invested billions to create integrated connectivity that forms the bedrock of our IoT solutions. Now, with the right blend of automation, AI, and analytics, local authorities can immediately monitor what's happening in their city, leading to real-time responses that improve service delivery and performance while reducing costs and resource consumption. So, let's embrace the potential connectivity in IoT to make our cities smarter. The future is now, and we can't afford to be left behind. MTN Business. Business done better.
All right, welcome back, everyone. So, Dipta, thank you very much. So while you were presenting and giving all that info, we had some questions come in, so we're going to take those up with you now. The first question was from Rion, and he says, understandable that implementing any smart city solution is a massive scale endeavor requiring multiple layers, multiple players. Has MTN worked with any service provider to build out a solution?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rian. I think it is a massive project, and that's why we believe that, it needs to be almost built in different building blocks. And once we have got a architecture and the framework right, then we can, kind of work in different there. From an MTN perspective, absolutely, we are working with the ecosystem and the partners, because this is very niche players, working in different areas, and the assets that they bring to bear together with the MTN assets is what is giving birth to that. So very happy to share more insights, Rian, with yourself and your company, organization, to kind of share a bit more details on who are the ecosystem that we're working with.
All right, fabulous. And then a question from Taryn. Where on the scale of maturity would South African cities be categorized in terms of being smart?
Yeah, thanks, Taryn. I mean, that's also a great question. I think there are different maturity index that gets published. Some of them from a government perspective and some of them private agencies that they publish. I think, the scale, if I have to answer that question broadly around, what we are seeing from a South African city perspective, I think there are some great works, great assets, great building blocks that are in place in some of the cities. But bringing all of them together with a very agile and a strong policy to accelerate is something which most of the cities are working on. So, from the execution and the acceleration perspective, we look at the maturity, there's a lot more potential that we are seeing through the different data points. And if we look at some of the key initiatives that some of the cities in South Africa that we have already matured, there are some great maturity that we are seeing.
And are you seeing, and sorry, this is a question I thought of as you were talking, is there a growing drive from cities to move in this direction? And I ask that because it's as a sort of casual resident of the country, it's easy to be skeptical about. You almost want to throw your hands up and go, what's the point? But is there a drive in that direction?
Absolutely. We're seeing a massive drive. Recently our CEO, met with a lot of the premiers from the different cities. And the number one agenda point that we're seeing from a government perspective is to drive that. If you look at the private sector, there are massive investment, as Rian was pointing out. This is massive scale projects that we are looking at. There's a lot of money, that is being pumped into these projects to get the building blocks of the infrastructure, as I mentioned, both the hard and the softer player, and then we need to look at the acceleration. So we believe, there's a very strong positive future, and if we can accelerate and work at a stronger pace collectively together, then we can achieve the outcome very quickly.
Fantastic. Okay, and then finally from James, can you be part of the smart city infrastructure if you're still on 3G or ADSL?
Yeah, James, I think as I kind of mentioned, technology, if we have to, the networking side of things, it is all dependent on what the application layer or the data layer is looking at, what are the requirements? When we are looking at the likes of, 3G or 4G, absolutely, there are a lot of relevance that a lot of applications at the data layer that can still work, The architecturally, we can look at, as I said, on the public or the private component of it. So we cannot generalize to say, for example, 3G is not relevant, And I believe that we need to leverage the investments that as a country we have already made. Whereas there are definitely a lot of use cases in the slide where I spoke about the short term, medium term, and long term that would require the modern technologies likes of 5G, the likes of private wireless ecosystem. So it's a bit of a hybrid that we are seeing. It's not one or the other.
All right, good. Well, once again, Sudipta, thank you very much for your presentation. And good luck with the journey as it rolls out. Thank you very much.
The modern city is a powerhouse, fast-paced, dynamic, with millions of moving parts that must fit together seamlessly. But as cities grow larger and more complex, so too do the challenges they face. To keep ahead, our cities need to evolve, and the next step in this process is the development of smart cities. But what exactly is a smart city? Well, imagine a place where millions of devices collect and share data. That's devices fitted to power plants, traffic lights, water networks, schools, hospitals, police patrols, community services, and even individual citizens' engagement, all in real time. This data can then be analyzed and used to manage city assets, so resources and services can be allocated fast and effectively. And this isn't a story about some distant future. With the power of 5G and smart solutions of IoT, science fiction is fast becoming science fact. Smart cities are a reality, and any urban area that wants to meet the needs of its citizens in the 21st century needs to embrace the technology. Following international best practice, smart city IoT solutions use data sharing to improve economic development, improve infrastructure planning and maintenance, digitally optimize public assets, automate services, and help clean the environment. That means smart roads, smart buildings, smart water monitoring, smart waste management, smart safety and security systems, and so much more. It's a real win-win, both for our cities and their citizens. The only question is, how can you 5G your city? And the answer is quite simple. MTN Business is already an industry leader in the space and has invested billions to create integrated connectivity that forms the bedrock of our IoT solutions. Now, with the right blend of automation, AI, and analytics, local authorities can immediately monitor what's happening in their city, leading to real-time responses that improve service delivery and performance while reducing costs and resource consumption. So, let's embrace the potential connectivity in IoT to make our cities smarter. The future is now, and we can't afford to be left behind. MTN Business. Business done better.
All right, and now we move to a panel discussion. You know, the smart city is an idea of future cities, where we're connecting all of the physical, the IT, the social, business infrastructure to make use of the collective intelligence that comes from all of that is derived in a city. And we're looking at a city that monitors all of its and integrates all of its infrastructure, critical infrastructure, including administration, healthcare, education, public safety, real estate, transportation, utilities, all of them using smart technologies to come together. So now let's take a little bit of a dive into what this all means. Where are we now? How do we get there? So I have a panel assembled, and I can see them on my screen, all kind of there and ready to go. So I'd like to introduce them now. We have Tash Botha, Senior Solutions Sales Specialist for MTN Business. And then we have Lawrence Boyer, Smart City Leader for City of Johannesburg, and then Neil Munsami, Director of Sales, Bonetta International. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for being here. I hope you're ready to be grilled on the topic of smart cities, where we are, how we get there, and the challenges we face in between. So I think, to get things rolling, Tash, I'm going to start with you. And it's a question, it's kind of a quick fire question, and I'd like each of you to answer it. And Tash, we'll start with you. And the question really is, what on earth is a smart city? What constitutes a smart city? Tash.
There's multiple components, right, that we have to take into consideration. And from an MTN perspective, we look at the kind of infrastructure and the connectivity as the bedrock, of IoT and smart solutions. So it's very important for us to understand, especially in a South African context, when we're looking at a particular either a campus environment for university or healthcare or mining, it is critically important for us to understand firstly what connectivity we can provide for that particular customer in their environment, and make sure we provide the best quality infrastructure and connectivity for that particular customer. We also, looking at software-defined networks as a huge enabler for us from an IoT perspective. So that becomes a critical discussion that we have with our customers. And incorporating with the acceleration of IoT and all the sensors and the devices that we have to connect to this network, security becomes an important factor that we discuss with our customers. So we look at the infrastructure, we look at a software-defined network, we look at private networks, public networks, we look at Wi-Fi, indoor, outdoor. We look at the IoT from a sensor perspective. How do we incorporate all this technology and make sure we deliver the best service? But with all this acceleration of IoT, there's an important aspect of security we need to take into consideration, which is a huge component of our discussion we have with our customers. And then the acceleration of data and the proliferation of data and having that cloud discussion becomes critically important. So enabling a smart city, enabling a smart campus, a smart healthcare, smart mining, smart education, we are required to have a very holistic view. So from an MTN perspective, we collaborate with our customers, co-create with them to try and see where we can define use cases together. We partner with significant partners in the market and leverage this ecosystem that we have to deliver these IoT solutions for our customer. So in order to get to a smart city, there's multiple components, multiple aspects we need to take into consideration. And as MTN, we positioned well to have those sort of high-level discussions with our customers, but also become a trusted advisor within their environment and architect the smart city together with our partners and our customers.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that, Tash. And then now, Neil, I don't know if that kind of lines up with your thinking around smart city. What is it? What would make a city not dumb but smart?
Absolutely. So I do agree. Most importantly is the infrastructure around it, and that's where we come in. If the infrastructure is in place, then we need to educate the end users. In order to get a smart home, it constitutes a building or automation for the home or business. But this involves the control and automation of lighting, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, security as well. And even refrigerators and kettles and toasters in the future. But all of that is dependent on the infrastructure, which I believe is on its tracks and on its path. The process has started, I think, more than 6 years ago from what we've seen in the retail space. We were the first ones to actually bring in some products about 7 years ago. And just to give you a quick background, we are Bonita International, which is bring new technology to Africa. So we focus on smart products, connected home devices, and IoT to help and make the smart home more convenient for the end user. But I think it's still the knowledge that we just need to drive to them and let them know that we can make a smart home and the environment more comfortable for them. So yes, we are on track, and it's that awareness that we just need to drive for that. So yes, we look forward to that.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Neil. And then, Lawrence, I'm coming to you last because I'm going to get your view on this, but then also a follow-up question, and you can kind of go from one to the other if you want, or combine them as you wish. So the opening question was, well, what is a smart city? And since you're from the city of Johannesburg, if you can then talk to Joburg, is there any city in South Africa we could classify as smart? And where is Joburg on that journey? That I'm sure, very long, complex, and very layered journey, Lawrence.
Thank you very much. I don't think we could say that we have a fully fledged smart city in South Africa at the moment. Yes, we are on a journey towards becoming smarter. I don't think we will ever say that we've arrived, because there's evolution and dynamic changes in technology, etc. that happen all the time. You know, what might be today's smart infrastructure may not be in the future. You know, So it's about having an idea about what kind of a society we want to create for our citizens, the people who live in the city. And for me, at the heart of it, if you look at take what Tash and Neil were saying, and then bring it to a city government perspective, it's really about bringing convenience to the people who live in the city, so that all the things that you want to do, you know, whether you're an ordinary resident, you're a visitor, you're a business person, etc., you can do those conveniently. You know, and you can do them anywhere, anytime, etc. And technology enables that. For instance, we are now in a conversation. We don't need to be in the same venue. We're sitting in different places. So the technology enables that. That's the convenience that we're talking about. You can take that to a resident or a citizen. Somebody wants to apply for a passport. In future, we shouldn't need to go to a Home Affairs office, to be able to do that, etc. Like we are already doing with other things, like online purchasing, etc. So to enable those things needs the infrastructure that Tash was talking about and Neil. But I also want to add this: when we talk about a smart city, technology, yes, is one, but also our processes are very important. For instance, digitalization or digitizing our processes, moving away from paper-based manual processes, automating, etc. And that's part of making it convenient, for anyone that is dealing with us as a city. But also, our people must be smart, So smart people means that not only they understand the technology and they can use it, but also they have access to it. Now, in terms of access, for instance, you look at the mobile phone penetration in the country is quite high, but smartphones not so high, and also internet not so high. Especially in terms of low income areas, etc. If you talk about fiber to home, for instance, the penetration also is skewed in favor of middle class and upper middle class areas. Even though there is, from an infrastructure side, an expansion that is taking place, getting into the townships, for instance, but the last mile connectivity is still a factor. So we need to then ensure that the benefits of the infrastructure that through the telcos and MNOs that they've done is spread to reach out to all the corners of the city, but also to all the households, so that we can then fully, and confidently say that we have a fully connected city. So this thing like IoT then and etc. then become meaningful to a lot of people. Let me stop at that.
Okay. Well, that gives there's a long journey to go, but we're somewhere on that journey, which is good. Now, the basis of this webinar this morning, underneath it all has been this idea of connectivity. Connectivity being the bedrock, and absolutely it's true. IoT, 5G, all of these things build on this layer of connectivity. But we have a unique challenge, as we know, and you mentioned one of them, Lawrence, which is access. But then even more basic than that is the ability to power all of this, our power situation, and we know how critical it is. We're going through our worst period of load shedding right now than we've ever had. So how do we start to address this? Can smart cities address this in any way? And even when there is a power supply, then there's the theft of cables, so all of that. So Tash, your thoughts on this rather complex thorn in the side of all of it?
Yes, absolutely, Ryan. It's definitely a complex thorn for us, and we've had to become very creative in our approach to solutioning, especially when it comes to power issues. So we as MTN obviously have got a very aggressive network improvement plan, battery rollout plan, etc. But when it comes to looking at solutions for our customers, we've got to partner. We've got to put our heads together, co-create with our partners, with our customers, so we can address it. So we've had to just become very creative in how we address certain aspects. But when we do our feasibilities and look for the connectivity requirements in particular areas, We really go into a deep dive into, the sort of resilience built into our network and make sure that we've got various paths. So if one link fails, as an example, it fails over to another, we've got to take power into consideration. We look at all sorts of solutions now to make sure that our customers stay up. It's very, very challenging, but it just means that we need to be a bit more creative, put our heads together to solve those problems for our customers. But yeah, very challenging indeed.
And Neil, I liked your analogy. You look at your analogy, the smart home sort of being analogous to the smart city, and you start to build all these components, and the power is certainly a factor in that. And I'm wondering, should we be thinking about building power infrastructure into the idea of a smart city? I know, the down in the Western Cape Town's looking at sort of getting off the grid, or at least bringing power under their own management. That's complicated by political, policy, legal issues. But should we just be thinking about building that into our thinking in building a smart city?
Absolutely. I think it's a major part. It's critical in order to have smart devices running. You do need that power. And I think almost 80% of the devices would depend on that. So it's quite a critical part to it. On the smaller or the back end of products, I think there's quite a few that they innovate and they try to do battery operated cameras and battery operated UPS or inverter systems. But I think the major factor is to get that infrastructure running, so your network is up and running, and your critical elements like the power for these cities. To get your devices running, yes, it has to be integrated. So I think it's a major part to that and something that should be incorporated into this. So yes, definitely.
All right, and then Lawrence, moving away from the power now, it seems one of the big issues around smart cities, or not so much an issue, but is you mentioned access. You want to get people connected, and we've seen international cities that have successfully rolled out Wi-Fi across city nodes. Where are we? What has prevented us from doing that? And I know there have been projects that have tried, for certain areas. I don't know how successful they've been in the long term, but are we able to bridge that gap, or are we able to get these Wi-Fi nodes rolled out across the city? Like, let's say Sandton, get all of Sandton connected, get all of Soweto onto Wi-Fi.
For me, the starting point is understanding where digital infrastructure fits in, and the services that come out of that within the basket of the services that the city provides. We all understand that, for instance, as part of basic services, you get water connection, get electricity, waste removal, but you don't get digital connectivity as part of that. And therefore, Wi-Fi rollout in the city is not looked at as part of the core infrastructure that is required. Is currently looked at as a project, right. and that project then has to compete with bigger projects for funding, and almostly, it will then get a very small slice of the budget. That is why in the period since the city started talking about smart cities, from when we were preparing for the World Cup, the Soccer World Cup to now, 12 years later, we haven't gone beyond 3,000 public Wi-Fi access points in the city. We should be sitting at something like 20,000 at least, covering all public areas, stations, parks and everywhere, as part of making that connectivity easier. So I think we need to sort out that issue where we make internet access, part of the services that the city must, if it cannot provide it, but it must facilitate it, to ensure that it gets there. That's why, for instance, we are keen to talk to the MNOs, for instance, and the telcos about how we get fiber to home and also Wi-Fi throughout the city, because we don't necessarily have to fund it as a city, that core infrastructure, but maybe they can come into the party like we are seeing now, for instance, with the CCTV cameras all over the city. We do have our own cameras as part of creating a safer city. But your private sector players like your Vuma, CAM have put up these cameras in all the suburbs, and we want that to be extended to the townships. I must emphasize this, that it must also go to the townships. 5G must go to the townships, etc. But we don't have the funding for that. So that's why engagements with your MTN, your Vodacom, others, etc., we can look at how we achieve that.
All right. Well, that brings up an interesting issue, and one of the problems with smart cities, Tash, and I'm going to come to you with this, is it tends to be, and we see this, where there are a variety of projects and infrastructures which are themselves not being very smart because they're not integrating with each other. So, we've had fiber rollout, the Vuma cameras. There seems to me, and you can tell me where this is, like technologically, fairly quickly, we could get Wi-Fi throughout the city. I mean, there's already stuff going on, and in my mind, there's enough there that it could be done. But how do we kind of connect it to the city, like getting the city and this already existing infrastructure talking to each other? And Tash, that's for you. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's it's important when we are looking at these sort of projects. Like Lauren said previously, we need to look at it not in isolation. So when we're looking at it from a we need to be looking at it from a public-private perspective, so how can we collaborate together? It becomes critically important. And in terms of our ambitions for 2025, I mean, that is a huge aspect of us, is we are not going to get there if we don't collaborate and we don't co-create together. So it is requiring us to look at very strategic partners and to look at collectively how can we achieve these projects together. So private and public sector play a very important role in collaborating together with these sort of projects.
Are there facilities? Just a follow-up question to you, Tash. Is there anything in place to facilitate that coming together, that collaborating, or is that in itself still a bit all fragmented?
I think MTN is in a very good position, and that's what we pride ourselves in, is bringing these parties together so that it becomes a critical role for us. So we have the ability to be able to co-create together, but be able to leverage different stakeholders, so to bring everybody together and to lead those discussions together. So that is a critical point that MTN is driving, is we're in that position to be able to facilitate those discussions.
Okay, great. All right, so moving now from Wi-Fi in the city, let's talk about another massive part of a city like Johannesburg, and it's similar to the other big cities in the country, and replicated in smaller detail in the smaller cities. But transportation, throughout South Africa, we have, I think that it's like around 22 million people being moved to and from work daily with taxis, which so-called informal transport. Is there, from a smart city perspective, is there a way to kind of bridge that gap between the formal public transport, the informal? How do we smartify that? Neil, I don't know if this is your area or not, but your thoughts on how we would even tackle that.
So personally, not really, not products that we could do that could handle that just yet. But definitely my opinion is that it's needed. It's something that we have to look at. I can't remember when last I actually took a taxi in this country, so I'd like to try. I think our kids should look forward to some sort of smart travel. If it's get on a train, just clock in and get off on another spot in town. So yes, I think that's something that we should look forward to.
Okay, good. Well, it's a large topic, and Lawrence, in your and before I ask Lawrence's question, if there are questions from anyone watching, please do submit them in the chat. They will be sent through to me, and I can ask the panel. So, so having said that, Lawrence, transport. This has got to be something that's kept you up more than one night thinking about how do we address this.
Well, there's different dimensions to it. I mean, we refer to it as smart mobility, actually, where we look at a whole range of mobility enablers, from just walking,
Oh no, Lawrence! This looks like load shedding. The challenge, and it's so. And I had a follow-up question for him. Well, hopefully he's got an inverter, some sort of backup, and he will come back online. Oh, that's a shame. I really wanted to get to this question. Okay, so from your standpoint, let's go back to you, Neil, for a moment. I mean, I asked you probably a little unfairly about transportation and so on. So from your standpoint, though. Where do we stand in? Sorry, where are you, Neil? Where are you physically located in the world?
In Lone Hill, Johannesburg.
Oh, okay. So you're very close to the studio. Okay, good.
Very close. Very close.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. Okay, so you're in Joburg, and let's talk about Sandton, Joburg. Where are we in the journey to smart city, and how can we take the next steps? What do we do next to get ourselves closer to being there?
I think we've identified some of the issues, but I think we just need to look forward to what we can actually do to alleviate that transport issues. Public transport, I believe, I mean, if we could get more of the Gautrain more available through more parts of the city, definitely. That's something that we should look at. That's one part of it. I think the other part is just that education to the end user of the benefits of actually having a smart home, the energy saving that would help, the cost of living, the ease of living, and that's ideally what we're trying to get to. I mean, the benefits of all of this comes that you save or that you have a more convenient life. But putting all of that, I think in one little basket, that's what we aim for. If the infrastructure is there, which we always go back to, because if that's available, like the 5G and all of that, it helps all the little products and the devices that you can get into your home to sort these out, like security and so on. So I think the idea is there, which is brilliant. And it's a matter of educating more and more people as we do it. We do a lot of campaigns through retail so that people can get this going. And I think, just that more awareness of that. And from my side, I think that's what we can just constantly work on, looking at devices that can actually help and benefit the public.
All right, great. Thank you for that, Neil. And now that then brings up a question of capacity. You know, I'm amazed by how, if I think back to my very first computer, which I bought, I think in 1988, and at that time, it was a 40 megabyte hard drive was what came in your PC. And when I bought it, the guy at the time said, if you hang on for another 4 months, they're coming out with an 80 megabyte hard drive. And I remember thinking at the time, like, what would I do with 80 megabytes? You know, how could I possibly ever use that much data? And then we see where ourselves, you know, now it's 128 gigs on your phone. And we're always finding ways to use that storage, to use the data, because the technology facilitates that. And Neil, you've been talking about, you know, getting smarter and smarter, everything in our homes getting smarter, toasters, eventually the fridge, all of this. So Tash, is there, from a 5G perspective, do we have the capacity to deal with the enormous amount of data and bandwidth that's going to be required by 5G as we get smarter, as we start connecting, power to the grid, as we connect transport to all these infrastructure things? Do we have the capacity to deal with it, or does that have to be built out along with it?
Yeah, Ryan, it's a very good question. I think with the the evolution of technology and the aggressive 5G play that MTN has now at the moment, 5G becomes critically important because it enables us to look at use cases that we never were able to look at before, which requires low latency, especially in any industry for that matter, but healthcare in particular, manufacturing as an example. So with all that data requirements, MTN in parallel is building out, our ambition, one of our goals in terms of Ambition 2025 is to build out the largest, most valuable platforms. This becomes critically important. So in order to accommodate all this data, because data is just, is on a huge acceleration in itself. So we're going to need these platforms to be able to manage data and, more importantly, provide the insights that our customers need in order to better serve their customers. And then putting security and wrapping security around all of this, because with more and more IoT devices out there, requires us to be very vigilant around securing these networks, securing Wi-Fi networks, securing these IoT devices. But yes, to answer your question, it's the platforms to manage all of this data and store all of this data becomes critically important for us, and is absolutely top of mind for us in going forward.
All right, and then a question that was asked to Sedipto, and he spoke to it, which I just want to kind of address here as a follow-up question to you, Tash, is that we do have, even Lawrence was talking about, today's fabulous technology is tomorrow's ancient stuff. So we have a lot of infrastructure. How do we make sure that that isn't left behind from a perspective of 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, ADSL, to make sure we don't lose anybody who's on old technology along the way?
Yeah, I think it's important to, when we do look at different industries and different verticals, whether it's in public sector or private sector, we look at the use cases first of all. So if we look at the use cases, there are instances where we can look at, older type of technology, especially those, and looking how we can transform the old technology into new. But there are instances where we do need to accommodate and look at ways that we can accommodate the older type of technology and see how we can still provide these sort of use cases, with the transforming technologies that are happening. But in most cases, we are dictated by, policies and all those sorts of things. But like there was a question around ADSL, can we still, transform with ADSL technology? The answer is, ADSL has a place, but if you look at sort of the software-defined networking, that's the route that we're going now. You can incorporate any type of technology and sort of connectivity mediums, ADSL being one of them. But it is an older type of technology, and with the newer technology coming in now, it's coming in at a cost-effective rate. So we are able to offer broadband alternatives to ADSL, which becomes important. And then also, being able to have those sort of broadband connectivity options accessible, not only in, sort of the cities, but also in the rural areas becomes critically important for us, and leveraging our mobile network. So as MTN, it's about, incorporating our mobile network, our ICT network, and getting our reach into rural, not only in cities, but also into rural areas. And sometimes where we don't have that reach, we'll partner, to make sure that we're collaborating together with partners and we're able to extend our reach into those areas where we potentially don't have the reach right now.
Okay, great. And then Lawrence, I see you're back. Welcome. Okay,
the
so
shedding scourge. Caught up with me.
Oh, don't we all know the feeling? Okay, Lawrence, there was a question that came in from the audience for you just as you were leaving, and we're pretty much going to end on this question, and that is, what is the progress of the Lanseria Smart City project? That question from Rian.
Well, first of all, it's a presidential project.
Yes.
It's led from the presidency, and the two interjoining provinces, are leading, Gauteng and Northwest. we have a major part in that project, but we are not really the leading drivers of that big initiative. There are things that we have to do. For instance, where we have to approve the development framework, which we have done as a city, and now the big issue is how to fund the development, and that's where the discussions have been, to look at the funding instruments, special purpose vehicles, in terms of the pooling of the land, because the land belongs to different landowners, etc. Pulling all of that land into one single entity, and then doing detailed planning on each piece of land, and looking at the funding. So that is where it's at. So we are not at the stage where we can say we're turning the soil, and brick and mortar is going to hit the ground very soon. We're still a long way from that. Thanks.
Yes. Okay. Great. Well, Lawrence, thank you very much, and thank you, and thank you to our panel. I think it's going to bring us to the end of this panel discussion. So I'd like to say thank you very much to Neil Moonsamy from Bonetta, from Tash Burta, Solution Sales Specialist at MTN Business, and of course Lawrence Boyer, Smart City Leader, City of Johannesburg. Thank you very much to the panel.
Thank you, Ryan.
And
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And like with all panel discussions, it always seems like you just start getting on a roll, and the scope of the work starts to become very clear, that no matter where we are in the journey, there is still a very, very long way to go. And I think Lawrence alluded to it, and I like the idea is, the truth of all our plans, our great ideas right now, is that we never get to the destination, because by the time you're halfway to the destination, you realize that maybe the destination has changed. Maybe we can do better. We can go further. Or the technology has changed to the point where there are new and better things to do. Things, and Tash mentioned this point, is that, once technology enables something, you only have to go down the road a little bit to realize that there are much better things to do. There are better ways to integrate, or new solutions, new ideas. So it's very dynamic. It's ever evolving, and I know every city in the world has its challenges. But it sometimes feels like our challenges are particularly brutal when we look around the power issues, the access issues, and the knock-on effects they have socially and economically. So it is a long journey, but I think importantly we are on that journey, and with that we can move forward with at least a little bit of optimism. All right, let's move along in our program. So having had the panel discussion, we're now going to look at a solution to Africa's overpopulated megacities. It is predicted that Africa is going to be the fastest urbanizing continent on the world. That comes as no surprise. So how does smart cities impact this? How does it help? What is the solution there? And to present this is from the city's lead for PwC, and I'm going to hand over now to Mr. Craig Kesson.
Thank you very much, Ryan, and it's great to be with you here today. It is indeed a fascinating topic to think about what Africa's urban transition means for both the continent, but most importantly, its people over the coming years and coming decades, and where what sometimes seem challenges to us actually may emerge as opportunities if we are fully cognizant of the fact that there are a number of developmental issues that the continent needs to deal with, but understanding exactly how those issues intersect and transact with technologies for citizen and people benefit is ultimately the proposition of smart cities. And I think that, the audience would be well attuned to the fact that this urban transition is rooted in a population transition in Africa fundamentally. And it's really critical to understand that. There has been a very large push in Asia over the past few decades and century for a population explosion, really, that has seen so many more people added to those societies. And really what is happening in the future is a similar, although perhaps not as significant in scale, but proportionally similar growth in Africa's population. And that is really the key to where the opportunity lies, in this kind of demographic shift and demographic change that ultimately speaks to a fundamental change in the way that people live, the communities in which they live, and indeed their cities. And it really does remind me of something that I find quite powerful from the development economist Sir Paul Collier, who speaks about the fact that most of the cities that Africans will live in by the year 2100 have yet to be built. We have a number of cities that are on the continent already, a range of emerging and growing cities, and indeed quite a few potential candidates for megacity status, which is really about population numbers and the tipping point over 20 million people. But the transition in income for those cities is absolutely critical in thinking about the socioeconomic conditions under which a smart city proposition starts to make sense and starts to be more realistic. And that really is illustrated, I think, quite powerfully in this graph, which is at a scale that tries to demonstrate where, in terms of percentage of urban population and income numbers, Africa sits. And that's represented in these red dots that, as you can see, are slowly making their way up the graph from low income to lower middle income to upper middle income status. And that's a trend that is, in developmental terms, obviously there have been recent setbacks with the pandemic and other developmental outcomes, but the point is that there is a positive trajectory. And that positive trajectory really allows one to confront, yes, the possibilities of urbanization, but also, as Harvard economist Ed Glaser would call them, the demons of densification. But the social goods that the population growth portends and urbanization are undeniable. According to the OECD, there is a definite increase in per capita GDP for urbanizing African cities over time. There is an increase in skill sets that are located in urban areas. There are better educational outcomes, as well as better access to financial services and the goods around them. So there really are the social conditions that can enable a different and positive urban transition. But that urban transition, and I think speaking to your topic today, is really about where can we locate the promise of the city. And for me, when I look at Africa's potential, I really am focusing on what are the emerging secondary cities, those new cities that are being built, but also where existing cities are adapting themselves to the realities of really accelerating population growth. And that is of a piece with, the fact that more people in the world live in cities now than in rural areas for the first time in history. But the confrontation I think we need to have is thinking about what is the infrastructure change that fully enables a smart city. And I often think that the language that's better to use is to talk about a smarter city, especially in the context of Africa and in the developing world as a whole, where you really are talking about hybrid cities, cities that have a mix of the formal and the informal, that have, in some cases, some level of sunk infrastructure, but often not. And what are the dynamic systems that emerge in managing those complexities in a coherent way, in a way that embraces the dynamism that is inherently part of that potential, and that actually involves multiple partners. It involves partners in government, it involves partners in the private sector, but it also involves, most critically, designing and building around what are those citizen or individual population needs. And I think that that's where we can really start to wrestle with what these emerging technology themes and trends are in African cities. And these are, as I say, things that have been either launched individually by governments, that have been bought by private sector solutions, partnering with government or partnering with private developments, or indeed just the behavior of citizens themselves. People don't wait to receive passively a service that may be offered to them. The potential of the technology that is available to every person now, whether with a smartphone or digital enablement of a payment system or a social media platform, has absolutely transformed the expectation of how one receives services. And so while there are a couple of bespoke smart city services or initiatives in Africa as deliberate government investments, I think that the field is actually much broader than that. And the field is really looking at where do the technology requirements that enable a transformational change come from. And we've identified 8 of these as critical for really unleashing the potential of a smarter city in the context of Africa. Artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, blockchain, virtual reality, 3D printing, drones, robotics, and augmented reality. Not only because many of these technologies are currently present, but actually their application through very complex ecosystems of actors, of individuals, of citizens, is already taking place to some degree in certain parts of the continent, and some with greater efficacy than others, but really understanding what the potential of that is absolutely critical. And I think that there is a great distinction that needs to be made in thinking about how do you potentially leapfrog a certain infrastructure level provision to understand how you can gain from technology that citizens are using already, or some level of investment. But in order to do that in a way that actually maximizes the potential, it's best to think about how you move towards a fully digitally transformed city away from just optimization-focused cities. And the distinction is important, especially in the context of the hybrid city that I spoke about. But it's important in the sense that for 2 decades, even 3, the smart city proposition was very vendor heavy, not necessarily one that was appropriate for the level of funding that African cities themselves have, or even private developers or associated industries in Africa. And those outcomes and that narrative often still speaks to an optimization focus. How can you improve a current process that you're offering? How can you make what it is you are doing slightly to a little bit better? There really needs to be a refocus about what does a citizen-centric service look like? What is the outcome that you are trying to achieve? And then work back from that outcome to understand how technology or digital enablement fully allows or realizes that potential. Because then you are actually designing with the end user in mind and not just looking to make an existing system or legacy system more efficient. And that design principle allows then for interconnections through technology, through data, across multiple platforms, across multiple vendors to actually transform the citizen experience. So you're not only reliant on one monolithic investor or system trying to control all of the myriad intricacies of a city, but actually are encouraging a dynamic platform of interaction, and one where there is a free flow of technology and data that actually supports really the dynamism and the frenzy of the hybrid city and the formal and informal reality of Africa's current urban position, as well as its future urban position. And that leads to a few outcomes. It leads to technology enabling a better and safer place for living in community. Thinking about technologies of human settlements and community services and amenities and safety and security, drawing from, for example, the possibility of 3D printing and new structural materials. The idea of understanding what does creating a digital twin mean for revolutionizing how you understand the built environment in a way that can truncate decades of former investment in master plans and city plans and the like. Understanding what that means for supporting the economy of the future, the transaction that's enabled by an Internet of Things platform, being able to link in economic services that citizens access, as well as provide a level of insight with drone technology that for many years was unavailable, both in terms of efficiency and scale, for those people trying to map the complex and ever-changing economic and built topography of a hybrid city. Introducing new and better ways to light, move, flush, and clean cities, especially linking to the just transition that African cities are trying to experience, understanding exactly what does that mean from a sustainability perspective, and how do you link in those technology questions to really unlock the city as a platform. And we like to think of cities as small C propositions, not big C propositions. Big C propositions for a city is one approach. It's one standardized setting for how all of these things are managed, and that can lead to unreasonable timescales, as well as really a bogged down, slow, lumbering approach to technology implementation and citizen engagement. And that really is not the pace at which technology works. It's not what citizens expect from a smarter city. And so thinking about small C cities as a place, embrace that multiplicity of the ecosystem, and actually allow for an approach across the full spectrum of city delivery and all of its delivery partners, public, private, civic, social, that actually uses technology as the bedrock for their new level of engagement. And to my mind, this is absolutely the perfect positioning for Africa thinking about its urban transition, and the fact that the new urban transition in Africa, as I said at the beginning, is still waiting to occur and is occurring over the next 80 years. And we have an opportunity to shape it in a way that to this point has not been done from a technology perspective anywhere in the world. So thank you very much, Ryan. It was great to be here.
And thank you, Craig, very much for that presentation. And it calls to mind, I think, where, you know, as technology evolves, if we go back to the analogy of making your home a smart home, you know, sometimes you have to retrofit in order to make it smart. But if you're building a house from scratch, you can build the technology in that. And that's always been an issue from the advent of water supply, electricity supply, and now internet and smart supply. And looking at the city from, it's somewhere on the scale. We got a city that is getting smarter, then becomes hybrid, and eventually we can call it smart when enough of the old systems have been integrated. But to extend the analogy further to building a new house and building all of the technology into it, what about building a new city, a new development? And we see new developments going on all around the country, certainly in the Gauteng-Joburg area, we see a lot of that. And we're going to end today's webinar on looking at, it's a bit of a use case study on all of this, and it's a project. It's a pilot project being done with the city of Johannesburg and a city developer. An early warning system that consists of wireless sensors and a software dashboard platform. The sensors can be installed on bridges and near residential settlements. The rising water level activates sensors. Once activated, alerts are sent via SMS and the internet. Alerts from the sensors are visualized on a dashboard where the alerts can be monitored in real time. So it's going to be interesting to see how this rolls out, and we can get a view of how it has and how this pilot project is rolling out. And this is going to be presented by the CEO of Smart City. And if he's there and ready, we're going to hand over now to Patwa Senene.
The modern city is a powerhouse, fast-paced, dynamic, with millions of moving parts that must fit together seamlessly. But as cities grow larger and more complex, so too do the challenges they face. To keep ahead, our cities need to evolve, and the next step in this process is the development of smart cities. But what exactly is a smart city? Well, imagine a place where millions of devices collect and share data. That's devices fitted to power plants, traffic lights, water networks, schools, hospitals, police patrols, community services, and even individual citizens' engagement, all in real time. This data can then be analyzed and used to manage city assets, so resources and services can be allocated fast and effectively. And this isn't a story about some distant future. With the power of 5G and smart solutions of IoT, science fiction is fast becoming science fact. Smart cities are a reality, and any urban area that wants to meet the needs of its citizens in the 21st century needs to embrace the technology. Following international best practice, smart city IoT solutions use data sharing to improve economic development, improve infrastructure planning and maintenance, digitally optimize public assets, automate services, and help clean the environment. That means smart roads, smart buildings, smart water monitoring, smart waste management, smart safety and security systems, and so much more. It's a real win-win, both for our cities and their citizens. The only question is, how can you 5G your city? And the answer is quite simple. MTN Business is already an industry leader in the space and has invested billions to create integrated connectivity that forms the bedrock of our IoT solutions. Now, With the right blend of automation, AI, and analytics, local authorities can immediately monitor what's happening in their city, leading to real-time responses that improve service delivery and performance while reducing costs and resource consumption. So, let's embrace the potential connectivity in IoT to make our cities smarter. The future is now, and we can't afford to be left behind. MTN Business. Business done better.
Hi, good morning, Ryan. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Just to give a bit of background, my company is Node One. We are a smart cities company. What we do is we develop IoT solutions for municipalities. Some of the solutions that we've developed are aimed at targeting some of the issues that municipalities face. Today's presentation will be in relation to a flood detection system that we've developed. I will break down the experiences that we've had in developing the solution specifically for the disaster management department in the city, and as well as how our engagement went with the city. Just go to the next slide. Okay, so the Tugela flood detection system is an early warning system for flood detection. The system consists of sensors that are installed near residential settlements as well as roads and bridges, areas that are typically prone to flooding. When triggered, these sensors send alerts to the disaster management departments, who then can view the information coming in real time via a dashboard. Once this information is received, they then can take the measures to dispatch relevant authorities such as traffic management departments or emergency services to assist residents who are being infected by flooding. So our strategy when you develop the system was first to develop a prototype, then approach the city. So what we did is we developed the first unit. We then went to the disaster management department and we sat down with them to understand what the extent of flooding is in the city of Johannesburg and how problematic is this an issue for them. We sat down with them, we learned about existing systems in terms of how do they relate to flooding, and we discovered that they didn't have an early warning system in place. So we sat down with them, we engaged with them, and they gave us feedback on how to improve that initial prototype that we had developed for them. So as things currently stand, we're on version 4 of the prototype, and this is purely based on the feedback that we received from the city. The system itself is 100% South African manufactured. What we did is we used prototyping IoT hardware as well as 3D printing technology to rapidly produce the prototypes. This was really beneficial for us because any feedback that we got from the city, we were able to improve the hardware without incurring a lot of costs as well as a quick turnaround time for the prototypes to be improved. We also leveraged existing IoT platforms where we could visualize the information from the sensors as well as keep a record of the flooding incidents. Once the prototype development was done with the city, we then embarked on a pilot project. Some of the key features of this, key goals of this pilot project from our company was to test the device in a real world environment because we developed it in somewhat in isolation. So the pilot project not only benefited the city in terms of identifying a solution that could solve the flooding issue, report the flooding issue, but also on our end, how does our hardware perform? Do the electronics perform as required? The network connectivity, especially because some of these installation sites are in former settlements. So we were able to test how the system operates in that type of environment. We were also able to test our engagement with the city of Johannesburg in terms of the coordination of the pilot. We were also able to bring in another municipality, the City municipality, to basically overview the pilot project to see how the system could also benefit their municipality. We also roped in National Disaster Management in COGTA to also have an overview of the pilot project that we embarked with the city of Johannesburg. So what inspired this system is the annual flooding that we suffer from here in Gauteng, as well as in different parts of the country. So one of the use cases of the system is that these sensors can be installed on roads and bridges. So once the sensors are triggered by the rising water level, alerts are sent to the disaster management department, who then can dispatch, in this particular use case, traffic management department to close affected roads and bridges, and thus preventing our road users such as pedestrians and drivers from attempting to cross flooded areas. The second use case is that these sensors can be installed near residential settlements. So when installed in these locations, alerts can be sent to disaster management, who then can dispatch emergency services to evacuate this particularly vulnerable areas such as informal settlements to remove those residents from an area that is about to be affected by flooding. One of the features of the system is SMS notification. So once the system is triggered, disaster management can receive SMSs from the sensors. But in our engagement with the disaster management department, we learned about the power that local councillors have. So instead of just sending the alerts to disaster management, we're also able to send it to local councillors who are closer to communities, who can be quicker to dispatch and immobilize the residents to move away from an area that is about to be affected by flooding. SMSs can be also sent to transport management organizations such as taxi associations and bus companies. These SMSs can inform them to avoid an area that is currently being flooded. In our engagement with Santam, which is an insurance company, they have a program called Business Adopting Municipality Program, where in our engagement with them, we learned about that this system can also benefit their companies so that they can be informed about when flooding is about to take place and reduce the insurance fees that they suffer, because they can inform their clients to move away from an area that is about to be affected by flooding. For example, move some of their equipment. Another feedback that we got from the municipality is that they do at the moment receive alerts from South African Weather Services, but the issue with those type of alerts is that they tend to be generalized over an area. So with these type of sensors, residents can receive localized reporting of flooding. So via an SMS short code and bulk SMS feature, residents can register on the system and they'll be informed via SMS about flooding that's taking place in their immediate vicinity. This system can also be used to inform residents about designated safe areas. Municipalities, for example, can inform residents to go to the nearest school, church, or town hall where they can seek refuge during flooding. Residents can also be informed about when it's safe to return to the location once the flooding has subsided. The second way in which alerts are sent is via a dashboard. So that the disaster management department has access to a dashboard where they can visualize in real time where flooding is taking place. So on a map, they can see the gray markers that represent a dormant sensor. As soon as the sensor is activated, it turns red, and then they can click on that particular sensor and they can get more information about that location. Is it a low-lying bridge, or is it near an informal settlement resident? And they can dispatch the relevant authorities to take care of that particular issue. Originally, when we developed the system, we had thought that the municipalities will run the system on their own. But in our engagements, we learned that a lot of municipalities don't necessarily have the IT infrastructure in place to support such a system. So our company does offer them a 24-hour monitoring system where we can receive the alerts on their behalf and forward them to the relevant departments within their institutions. In cases where a municipality does have the infrastructure, we provide them access to the API access, where they can receive the alerts directly from the sensors to their disaster center. So the key features of the early warning system, the way it benefits the municipalities, is that it allows them to receive quick and accurate alerts about flooding in their city. They also get 24-hour monitoring of their city in terms of flooding, as opposed to being relying on residents to report the flooding. For example, at night, people might not know that it's flooding. So the beautiful thing with IoT is that it never sleeps. So it's always online. Instead of the people doing the reporting, the infrastructure now does the reporting. And we are also able to give the municipality predictive alerts. So the goal of an early warning system is that we don't report when flooding is taking place. We're able to give an estimated time of when a particular level will be reached at the river level. So one of the ways we achieve this is by installing the sensors in a tiered manner, where we create basically levels of our warning levels, and we calculate the time lapses between each sector, and we can give the municipality an estimated time when a particular road will be flooded, bridge, or a residential settlement. So the key benefit of the system is that we then give the municipalities preemptive measures of evacuating residents and closing off bridges. And the goal of this is that it will reduce the rescue operations that municipalities have to embark on an annual basis. So instead of having roads being flooded, close the bridge, close the road, so nobody can attempt to cross. Because sometimes people try the luck, as you can see in that particular image. So the system can also be, alerts can be forwarded to local radio stations as well as the municipality's social media accounts, because the goal of the system is to broaden the message as broad as possible so that everyone can get an idea where exactly flooding is taking place. The system also benefits the residents by giving them a heads up about when flooding is going to take place in their area. They can collect their property, collect their vehicles, and move away from area and reduce the damage to their property, as well as limit damage to themselves. Because if an area is about to be flooded, we can give them a heads up and they can leave an area and they can be notified when it's safe to come back. These are some of the installation sites that we've, the city of Johannesburg identified. So the first site is the Struentla Informal Settlement in Alex. The sensor has been installed on that bridge. That system has been operating for 2 years. The sensor on the right is in Kliptown, in Soweto. This is based on the Klipspruit River on a low-lying bridge. So in this particular area, when it floods, the road users are affected as well as the local community to the right of this particular bridge, because those houses along that river are at a very low level. So when installed in these areas, we're able to give the municipality alerts about when this area is flooded. And the bottom two images indicate exactly where the sensors are installed. The sensor on the bottom right was unfortunately vandalized, which was one of the things that we anticipated, but we also got to learn about the challenges that we face as a country in terms of installing IoT sensors in the real world. So we were able to upgrade our enclosures so that we reduce the risk of vandalism. The one on the left in Alex has been active for 2 years, and we've not had any issue with that particular sensor. The other two sites, the first is at Klipspruit River. This is near the Freedom Charter Informal Settlement. This is located near that informal settlement. The one on the right is installed in a low-lying bridge in Lenasia along the Abu Bakr Asphalt Road. So these sensors were active during the 2021-22 rainy season, and we were able to collect alerts from these sensors and publish a report for the city of Johannesburg to review how the sensors performed during that particular period. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present my company system. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Patwa, and an excellent project and an excellent demonstration of the move to smart and what can be done. And as a variety and a greater and greater number of these sorts of projects start being done, we move ever closer to becoming a smart city. So all presentations from today in this webinar will be available to everyone that registered. If you go to the website, there is a tab for previous webinars and you can access any of the presentations from today. So please take advantage of that as you need. And there we go. We come to the end of the third installment of these IoT webinars, following, of course, from our agri webinar, our mining webinar, today smart cities, and our next is going to be manufacturing and industrial IoT. That coming up in November. So if that's a topic of interest, make sure you keep an eye out for that and register when it becomes available. And there we go. That wraps it up for the morning. A discussion, and it has to say a brief discussion because this is deep, it is layered, and can be complex, the idea of building smart cities in a country with all the challenges that South Africa has. I'd like to thank all of the speakers, the panelists, everyone involved. Thank you for being a part of it. And of course, MTN Business for providing these platforms and a way and a a place where these can be discussed, and the future of IoT in every aspect of life becomes is discussed and outlined. So from me, Ryan Hogarth, your host, thank you very much. Go well, be safe, and do great things.